Chapter 40. What is truly there. After I took Bo into the cave, and after I showed him the slake, and after his eyes grew wide as oyster shells while I pressed my hand over his mouth to stop him from waking the beast up with a string of curse words, we left our rowboat shelter behind and began hiking up over the next ridge. Rian's half of the map showed a bay on the other side. We didn't want to go too far inland because we still depended on the ocean for our food, but we hoped we'd find another sandy beach over the ridge, maybe even another cave we could shelter in, one without any nesting slakes. "Explain something to me," said Bo, pushing a dark-leaved branch out of his way. "Why didn't the slake tip our rowboat over when we were adrift? We were easy prey." "I don't think we are her prey. Remember what I told you about the whale with the claw marks down its flank? I think the slake hunts whales. It's just like Lark told me. All these animals come down south in the summer following the food." "So why'd she try to sink the Prosperity then? Don't you think she wanted to nibble the bones of some Mancon soldiers?" I smiled. "Now you sound just like Dumpling. I don't know why the slake tried to sink us. Mr. Lark is the scientist, not me. If that useless old bag were here, it'd be the crab sucking out his brains and not the other way around." I actually did have a guess, but it sounded too foolish to say out loud. Dumpling had called the slake a clever beast. Maybe he was right. She and her kind had survived all these centuries because no one had found them yet. She couldn't have known that the Prosperity was on a mission to make a map of her nesting grounds, but maybe she wasn't taking any chances. Maybe the Harbinger Sea was a graveyard for ships because the slake made sure of it. But if that were so, I had no answers for why she hadn't sunk our rowboat. She could have flipped us over with one flick of her tail. I thought of her staring at me through her golden eyelid. What had she seen when she looked at me? Whatever it was, she had decided to let us through. I didn't understand why, but I was grateful. I glanced over my shoulder at Bo, who was lagging behind, leaning on his crab-hunting spear, which now doubled as a walking stick. Maybe this hike was too much for him. He hadn't gotten his full strength back yet. "We've almost made it to the top. Let's stop here for a bit and rest." "I don't need a rest," puffed Bo. He looked around. "But I do need to—" "Right, use the facilities." He blinked at me. "No, I gotta take a pisto." I rolled my eyes. "Don't let me stop you. I'll walk ahead, just up there. Maybe the trees will clear out a little and I can get a view of where we are." I hiked through the brush, following the ridge. It sloped up steeply and the trees thinned away to scrubby fern and then bare rock. The ridge was narrow here, with a section that branched away to my right. I followed along that route until I could go no farther. The rock jutted out hundreds of feet above a wide, circular cove. The breeze cooled the sweat at my temples as I soaked in the view. I pulled out Payun's eyeglass and held it up before me. The water below was bright, clear, and teal, just like in the tropics, but through Payun's lens I could see pockets of dark blue where the bottom plunged out of sight. The cove was shaped just as the Pramong mapper had drawn it, a crescent bay with a narrow opening to the sea. Waves sprayed against a shallow reef that kept the water inside the bay as smooth as a pond. What I wouldn't have given for a sheet of paper and a pen in that moment. Looking around, I realized this bare spot was the best place to get a view of the entire cove. Maybe with the eyeglass, I could spot somewhere below that we could use for shelter. I took one step forward to get a better look, but the brittle rock crumbled and cleaved off, nearly taking me with it. I wheeled my arms and stumbled back, hearing the faint splashes of stone hitting the water far below. I didn't need to see a pretty view that badly. We'd just have to jump down and explore the cove on foot. "Bo!" I called out. "You done yet?" "Sai?" said a voice behind me. "Is that really you?" I turned around and stopped cold. It was Rian. Her dark hair lay in limp tangles against her cheeks, and her fine suit was tattered and shredded, but her lineal brooch shone bright as ever. An astonished smile formed on her lips as she held out both hands to me. When she spoke, her words trembled with emotion. "I thought you were dead." She stepped closer. A gash of dried blood across her cheek pulled tight as she smiled. "What in the world are you doing here? I had the crew search the ship for you after the storm. They told me you drowned." I swallowed, unable to speak. Rian's smile was so warm, her voice so sincere, that I couldn't turn away. My heart refused to believe she had ever wanted to hurt anyone. She grasped me by the forearms and held on tight. "A miracle, an absolute miracle," she said, then tossed her hair back and laughed. "You have no idea how glad I am to find you. After everything we've suffered, this is the good fortune I needed. But tell me, how in the world did you get here?" I fell overboard," I stammered. "I drifted here in one of the rowboats." "A miracle," she whispered again. Her bright happiness dimmed as she went on. "We have had nothing but bad luck since that storm. I sailed us in the wrong direction. We hit more bad weather and had to turn back. 2 days ago, we finally spotted land, the Sunderlands." Her eyes glimmered briefly, then darkened again. "But before we could celebrate, we ran aground." I gasped. "Ran aground? Where?" Rian put her hand on my arm and turned me to face the sea. Standing at my shoulder, she pointed to the northwest rim of the cove. "You may be able to see the ship from here. Something went wrong with the rudder again. It jammed, and no one could control the wheel. We ran straight onto the reef." I squinted against the sunlight, glancing off the water. One bare mist jutted past the rim of the cove, leaning at a sharp angle. My heart dropped to think of our prosperity, that beautiful ship lying broken and stranded on the reef. "It was eerie losing control like that," said Rian. "The winds were calm and there was no current. We just slowly ground into the coral, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. The crew say that demons had us on their hooks." "No, not demons," I thought. "A mother with a clutch of eggs about to hatch." "Is the hull damaged?" I asked. "Badly. I hiked up here to see if there is any hardwood we can take down. With our crew so thin, it will take weeks to make the repairs." Her eyes shone again with that bright ambition I remembered so well. "But we will make them, and then we will return to Mangkon to claim our prize. And now we have a true claim to it. After the storm, I was in despair. My map, the silk chart, was lost, and I thought I had lost my mapmaker as well. But now that you're here, the expedition is saved. We'll repair the ship and have time to chart the coast before winter hits us. You'll make a new map of the Sunderlands to bring back to the Queen." I looked up at her, aware of the weight of Payun's eyeglass in my palm. I had taken both the silk maps out of the case and had them folded up in my pocket. What would Rian say if she knew her chart wasn't lost at all, but was just inches away from her? She dipped her head to better meet my eyes. "Sai, what's the matter? Do you still doubt yourself? You mustn't. There's no one standing in your way now. Not Sangra, not Payun." Something about hearing their names on her lips sent a cold chill into the space beneath my ribcage. "You've still got the chance to do something marvelous," said Rian, "to make a new name for yourself." She went on, describing all the wonderful things that would happen for me when we returned. Accolades, opportunities, fame if I wanted it, solitude if I didn't. She painted my future in colors so vivid I could see it stretching out before me, a glittering gold vision. "So come," Rian beamed warmly at me. "Let's go back to the ship and get started." She held her hand out to me. I looked down at her open palm and back up to her face. My fingers rubbed the case of Payun's eyeglass. With one quick motion, I could open the case and hold the glass up to my eyes. I could see Rian for who she really was. "Tell me something," I said. She tilted her head, smiling curiously. "What?" "That night of the storm, did Captain Sangra fall overboard? Or did you push her?" Rian straightened her shoulders. She looked at me, her eyes true and unblinking. "Sai, I swear to you on my life, she fell." I slipped the eyeglass into my pocket. I didn't need it. "I don't believe you," I whispered. "Sai!" "Get out of my way." As I pushed past her, I watched her mouth curl into a snarl. I planted my feet to run. I made it 2 steps before Rian grabbed me. She wrapped both arms around my shoulders and squeezed. My ribs groaned. There was no space left to draw a breath. She leaned back, dragging my feet along the ground. I flailed with my legs, landing useless kicks to her boot-covered shins. I fought with everything I had, but her fingers gripped me like claws and held me fast. She growled with the effort of dragging me backward toward the edge of the cliff. Panic flooded my chest, and then I heard Mud's words in my head, just as clear as if he stood right beside me. "Just like I showed you, that's how a small girl brings a big man down." I pumped my arms like wings. Rian's grip slipped up past my shoulders. My feet touched down. Before she could grab me again, I dropped low. This was all reflex to me now. This move had been drilled into me so many times, not even my own father could escape it. I reached between my feet and seized Rian's ankle. I sat back against her knee, throwing all my weight, all my force behind me. "Ah!" she cried out. We fell backward and slammed onto the rock. I rolled away from her and heard a brittle crack as the rock beneath my legs broke and fell away. I clung to the edge of the cliff, all my body's weight resting on my forearms, my legs kicking at the air. Rian was up on her elbows. She spotted me dangling helplessly, and her eyes flashed, determined. Her muscles tensed as she made ready to pounce, and then a sudden burst of motion broke out above us. Before I could blink, Rian had been pinned down, her cheek flat on the rock. A crab-hunting spear pointed inches from her neck. Bo stood above her, gripping the spear tight in both hands. "Hello, Aunt Rian," he said, panting heavily. "So nice to see you again."